Tonight's episode of Colors of the Dark is brought to you by the new horror film, The Empty Space, now premiering on streaming services like Tubi. Andrew Jara's new cosmic horror film, The Empty Space. The Empty Space tells the story of Amy Andrews, a woman dealing with grief and anxiety after the death of her boyfriend. When that boyfriend comes back, Amy will have to decide whether a miracle occurred or something far more sinister that could cost her her sanity and maybe even her entire existence. Andrew Jara is a Mexican-American director who has been making shorts and features for a while now, but The Empty Space is his biggest feat yet and has been praised by critics for its realistic, frightening depictions of mental illness that Andrew Jara drew from his own experience. Empty Space was released by Bayview Entertainment to rent or buy, but now you can watch it on streaming services such as Tubi. The Empty Space. Hello, and welcome to Fangoria's Colors of the Dark. I'm your co-host, Rebekah McKendry, and with me, back from his European tour, is Elric Kane. How's it going?
Oh my God, I've been back for so long.
I know, but this is
I've
our
already
first
forgotten.
show back. You've only been back for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
I know, but it took
weeks.
like 3 days to forget everything that has happened in my life. It is the great amnesia. Except this, I am wearing, you can see things now. If you're listening to this episode, you also have the ability to see this on YouTube for the first time ever.
Y'all, we're going to YouTube. This is
Right.
pretty weird. It's going to be kind of a Zoom recording for a couple of episodes while we figure out, kind of how it goes to YouTube. And then after that, we might be in a studio looking like an actual show again.
But for me, even though this is horrifying to be on camera again, what is good about it is you get to see our t-shirts, which is something you don't get to do anymore. So you have a great aquatic one. And
it's actually Dracula, but I love this one because
he looked like a creature. Oh.
No, it's one of the, here, I'm standing up. It's one of the original Dracula stage play artwork, but I love it because they make him look so aquatic, which I always find really fascinating. So yeah,
I like that look.
Wear it for tonight.
I wonder if that's a little bit of the Demeter version that we'll get to see in a couple weeks.
That was also my thought.
Yeah,
so
I
yeah,
the only reason I brought
Dracula.
this up is because I am wearing the one
Profunda Rosa.
Yes, and so if you listen to our Patreon, you already know. But it was very exciting. I went to the store, the Profunda Rosa, which should be on every horror fanatic's bucket list. And
this is in Rome, right?
Right in the middle of Rome. I had to kind of go off on a little side exciting visit. And what's interesting, you wouldn't expect this horror store to be right in it's kind of right around fashionista kind of show. It's not buried the way Dark Dells is on a strip of that kind of stuff. This is right with mainstream stuff. And I walked up to it and you see the puppet from Deep Red, like a kind of a toy version of that in the window. And you go in, and downstairs is this amazing tribute to Argento, which is just like a little museum. It's interactive. It's $5, and you go down there for 15 minutes, and you get to walk through these fun little stage sets. And then you come up, and it's just a cool store with horror books, paraphernalia, all sorts of stuff. But what excited me and you when we were talking about it was that the person running it is the great Luigi Cozzi, who made Star Crash and Contamination and so many Paganini horror, I believe, just a lot of crazy horror movies, and assisted Argento, I think, at times. And he runs it. And when I say that, it's not like he owns it. He's in the freaking store. Him and his wife are literally just sitting there all day, and you get to have conversations with them. And it was pretty damn fun. And I got a book for you.
Yes, I have it here. So it is Italian Giallo movies. And then on the inside, he even got it signed to Rebekah from Luigi Cozzi.
So
it was
cool.
So sweet. Oh my gosh.
I truly didn't expect it. I was going to go no matter what. I did not expect that he was going to be sitting there. And it took me a second. I was like, oh my God, this is so wild. So, again, a lot of the books, the sad part, a lot of them amazing books I've never seen on subjects I've never seen.
How's your Italian?
Yeah, exactly. There was only about 3 or 4 that they had turned into English. And I got one on, that's the same authors. I got one on Italian horror and got you the Giallo one. So that was super cool. So there's lots of little things like that. I'm not going to, if you want to hear more about the trip, go to the Patreon. I don't want to regale you guys with boring travel stories, but it was the horror stuff was fun.
I just got back from my summer vacation where we did a camping trip up California and then back down. And so I went to the Winchester Mystery House, the Santa Cruz Mystery Spot, and the Bigfoot Museum,
Ooh,
all of which were that we went to the one in Felton, California, all of which were really fun. I think I enjoyed the Winchester Mystery Spot, or sorry,
Is it
I'm
creepy
combining
at all?
the Winchester Mystery House. There's a creepier version of it. Apparently there is like an actual like ghost tour that you can go on there, which goes through the basement, which I have to assume is massive because the house itself is like 20,000 square feet. It's huge. And there's a lot, like you see the rooms where people died. You see the room where she died. And then you go into her seance room, which is pretty creepy. And then there's just a lot of weird stuff. Like Sarah Winchester, the woman who designed the house, she was obsessed with the number 13. So much so that like if a sconce, like a chandelier went into her house, and it only had like 10 flutes on the side for light, she would add 3 more, just because she was very superstitious that everything had to be the number 13, even like panes of glass and mirrors and windows. That was kind of the wildest part. A lot of spider web motifs around, like it was clearly this gothic thing. And some of it was very much like her own superstition on ghosts. Like she had a bell tower that supposedly she would ring to like remove ghosts from the property. And so, it was, I was touring it at 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning. So I can't say it was, it wasn't like a haunted house, but there was definitely creepy stories in it.
Okay. Well, that kind of gets you up to date on our summers. I will say we cannot start this episode without a massive RIP to the GOAT of horror, and just one of the greatest filmmakers, one of the greatest personalities in all of movies, Mr. William Friedkin, who passed away a couple days ago. Just, again, 87 years old, full life, couldn't have had a fuller life. So mad respect to him. I think I've been to a couple of my favorite Q&As with him, but one with Toby Hooper, where it was all about Texas Chainsaw and how much he loved that film and what he would do for Toby. And it was just one of the most touching conversations I've seen live. And, so if you haven't, paid tribute, watch one of his incredible movies. I watched The Hunted, which I couldn't remember if I'd seen, which was like one of his more recent ones with Tommy Lee Jones and Benicio del Toro. More of an action thriller, but it's a lot of fun, really well made.
Sorcerer, and I mean, it's not even a horror one, but that one, it's always been my favorite of his.
That's my favorite of his films.
Bug as well. That's
Bug's
another
great.
one that it was just so under received because they marketed it as like a heavy horror film. This is probably like 2000 aughts it came out, based on a Broadway play, and they had marketed it as this like crazy horror film about bugs that burrow into your skin, and it's not. It's about a man with PTSD and psychological issues.
And as a play, it was a long
tight.
play.
Yeah, it was a really well-known play. So I love that one as well.
He had what some of the greats had, which is just this like they're just it doesn't mean they're fearless in real life, but there's a fearlessness to the topics and the movies that they just make these bold movies and do not care in the moment if they're going to be well received or not, but in the long run they tend to do great. And he really is one of the best, and there's so many deep cuts that if you start going through his filmography, I mean, I still like The Guardian. I liked it probably more and then like when it came out because it's probably a little goofier now, but I think Cruising is actually one of the scariest movies. I think there's parts of that it's truly unnerving. Again, a great director. If you only know him for The Exorcist, there's so many other films there. That said, The Exorcist is incredible. It's really one of the best. So massive respect to Mr. William Friedkin. What a life. But so like we have a bunch of new movies we want to roll through because we have some really good guests. I feel like we have to start just briefly because we kind of did our Patreon before our main show back, and we both got a chance to see Talk to Me Early, but it hadn't come out yet. And like for me, I think it's going to be my like horror film of the year. I just really the kind of things I love in a movie. I love to be surprised, and I love like when YouTubers in this case. These were YouTubing brothers, very creative. They take a big swing like this, and it surprised me, especially emotionally. I think it's really well connected emotionally by the end of the film. It does something different, in this kind of a gimmick.
I loved, because that's what I was worried about, is it was a gimmick, it's just, teens grab a hand and then suddenly, they're possessed by a ghost or something. There could be a pretty like low rent version of that, but this was heavy. It was really emotionally connected. And what kept me really fascinated is how well they wove that it's a symbolism of drugs. It's very much like this giant allegory for party drugs and how you're doing them socially and it's fun and you're recording each other as how fucked up you are. And then gradually you're doing it by yourself and then more and more, and you're getting further removed from your friend group. Like it was very much this, and it's got a drug subplot, with it as well, where it's all about one of the characters has previously used drugs. And so when things start happening to her, some of the other people are blaming her prior drug use for these things. And yeah, like that for me was, it just had this really deep level quality to it.
And it did that great thing that, that It Follows also did. The thing where it just leaves you wanting more. You don't get all the answers. You have all these things that you desire to know, and it makes the smart choice to go, no, we're going to give you just enough to keep you very excited. Like, I'm not going to know exactly what the hand is. You'll have some ideas of what the hand could be. But I did see today, and I remember afterwards going, man, this is one of the first horror films in a long time where I would love a sequel. And I'm like, well, A24 don't do sequels, really. And then today, the news has talked to me. I'm into it. I'm down.
No, this is, and I remember you saying that after It Follows, because It Follows did the same thing where it was just like, it's not explaining a damn thing. And I remember you afterwards being like, It Follows 2, I need it. Yeah. And of course,
I still would watch it if it came 10 years later. I think I think the you don't need the same characters in that one. I think it's much more about the thing itself. The curse is just such an easily repeatable. You could even do it in Tokyo. Like you could set the next Follows in a different country, So
that's what I feel about Talk to Me, is that I would not use these same characters again. I would not revisit them and see, the hand's back 10 years later. I would do what the denouement of this first film did, where it takes it and puts it somewhere else and then starts with a new storyline. I would definitely do that, because not that I didn't like these characters, but I felt like, I spent my time with them. We saw their story.
Totally. And their emotional story ended. I think the other danger is don't do a history of the hand. Don't do a prequel version
of the
hand. Like that would ruin. I mean, you can give little tips more, but hey, that's not our job. There's a writer's strike, so we can't give our ideas away for free. You get nothing. But I really loved it. I thought it was very electric, and it is still, like all good horror films. You think you live in a vacuum sometimes, right? Everyone loves it. It's great. It's like, I was looking at some of the people I really like on Letterboxd. A couple of them really didn't like it. And I was like, okay, interesting.
Because I just finished my horror production class at USC, where I have like 20 diehard horror fans who this is what they want to do for a living in the class. I had students not like it that were just like, I don't get it. I don't know. It wasn't scary.
But to me, that is always a good thing. Like if you only get uniformly, it's rare that you get uniform. It's like you always want something that rubs somebody as the best thing ever, and somebody else is just like, what? I don't like it. And to me, that's a great place to be. So very excited about that one. Hopefully everyone catches up to it. It did pretty well, but it didn't do as well as some of these other sequels that came out.
I think, A24, I mean, as far as their horror stuff goes, I mean, Everything Everywhere All at Once is going to be their biggest film to date. But I think that their biggest horror one so far is Hereditary. And I feel like this is now second in line underneath it. So, I mean, it did, in what limited theatrical release that it did do, I feel like they've made enough that they were immediately like, fuck, let's greenlight a sequel right now. So what I hope it does is, not that I have not enjoyed the A24 nothing happens and then everything happens in the last 10 minutes model. I know you love them. I know. But like when I'm looking at things like Lamb and Men, I enjoy those. But what I really liked about Talk to Me was it didn't feel like that. Like
I will say
that pacing.
I think that, part of the difference though is because we did see the Q&A and the guy from A24 said we did not make this.
It was
movie.
A negative pickup.
Yeah, he went to Sundance and was like, we need this movie. So it spoke to them. It has a lot of the similar hallmarks. I don't feel Hereditary isn't a particularly slow movie, and even The Witch moves at a pace.
But The Witch was a pickup as well.
Yeah, interesting.
They didn't make The Witch. I feel like that. I'm 99% sure that was another where it was made by a private production company, and then A24 picked it up for distribution.
If you would like this conversation to continue, go back a couple months where we did an A24 draft or something. Where we
we did. We ranked
pretty much all their genre
A24 films. Yeah, we did all their genre films, even ones that we'd never heard of before, like the Weird Space one with Mia Goth. That one I like highlight. But there was a couple. I remember there was like one I had never even seen an image. Like I was like, I still need to look at that one up. I think it was like a noir one. Anyway, that's our A24 plug at start. So we have two other horror films. Let's do it. Yeah, continuing with polarizing stuff, I'm going to jump into some of my other giant, movies of the summer. Haunted Mansion movie. So no one was. I was so excited for this. Like same as I did with the Meg, where it's like releasing on Thursday at noon. Me and the kids had tickets. We were first in the theater. I'm right there, ready to go. And from the trailer, I was so excited because it looked like it was sticking more closely to the ride. And the prior Haunted Mansion movie, the Eddie Murphy one, my kids enjoy it. I never really connected with it a lot. It had some connections to the ride, but it was very much doing its own thing. This felt like it was really using the mythology of the ride, to the degree that it sometimes really muddied the movie. And that became kind of the biggest critical thing of it too, is there was just so much going on of a ghost will follow you home. And we have 99.9 or 999 haunts here, and, kind of exploring all the different, many of them. Like, it made the movie feel kind of muddy. That said, I fucking loved it. And my kids loved it. And this isn't a ringing endorsement that you will love it. I loved it because I love the ride. And that's what a lot of the movie was. It was a lot of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Look what we did here. Hey, remember that little thing in the ride? Hey, we worked that into the background. And so it was just a lot of kind of winking at just diehard Haunted Mansion fans like myself. But that said, I had a really good time with it. Don't go because you think you're going to see Jared Leto. He was like nowhere in this movie. He was very CG'd and his voice didn't sound like his voice. And I've definitely talked to people who were like, it's not good, but I had a blast with it. So if you're a fan of the ride, Haunted Mansion movie.
I mean, I love the ride. It's my favorite thing at Disneyland, but I think I could wait till streaming for this just to
I have a feeling it will go. I kept wondering why Disney would release a Haunted Mansion movie during the summer. I mean, trying to get the summer blockbuster, but the movie itself just feels like it would lend itself to Halloween. And so my gut is that they did it during July so that they can do a big release to streaming for Halloween season. So that's, I don't know that for a fact. That's just me pontificating, but we'll see how it goes. But
yeah, the studios better hold on to their content because they might not have much content left.
Heard that. But I will say what I did like about this is it's gateway horror. Like, we do not have a lot of gateway horror right now. And so being able to take my kids into a PG-13 film that has some scary sequences, like it's still definitely got some pretty messed up sequences, and having them get that moment of fear, but then it's not going to push it too far. Like, it was just a beautiful gateway.
Yeah, kids, Gateway is not a gateway horror.
Not a gateway horror film.
It's a little flash insert to Society is one of the most gruesome things I've seen in a while, but I'm pretty sure it's a Society reference. It's pretty amazing.
It seemed like it. No, my daughter, when she asked that night that that I was going to the early screening with you, she was like, "Can I come?" Because I had just taken her to see the Sharksploitation documentary with me the prior night, and I was like, "I don't think you should see this one, honey." And I was really glad I didn't take her.
Yeah.
But Haunted Mansion. This will probably be my kid's favorite film of the summer.
Well, in terms of movies that make so much money, I just couldn't even believe it. Insidious 5, The Red Door. This is directed by Patrick Wilson, the star of much of the franchise, coming back to it. And I had no desire to see this in the theater. Like, I just didn't really register with me. The reviews were very middling. And so I just didn't see it. And then the day it came to streaming, I was excited suddenly because I was like, you know what? I love this franchise overall. The last couple have been kind of misfire-y, but still fun. And I was just curious what it would be. And it's interesting. It's 10 years later. And, him and his son had both been hypnotized back in the day to eliminate all of this stuff from their life. And it picks up where basically he's no longer married to his wife. He's a divorcee. Yeah, it's really weird. It really threw me.
Baller move.
Yeah, and she's in it. They're all at a funeral. And they're separated. His mom's just died. So it opens where his mom has now passed. And she's the one who hypnotized them and got rid of
Barbara Hershey's character.
Barbara Hershey's character, yeah. So she's gone. There's a photo of her. But here's the reason they're separated. And it's kind of sad. It is that because they gave this, did this hypnotism, huge chunks are missing for his character and the son. The son is now the same actor, which was really cool as the boy in the first. And now he's going to college. And so I actually really weirdly liked this movie as a family drama. Didn't care for it much as a horror. I thought it was okay. There's a couple good horror beats. There's a really scary jump scare early on. But as a closing of a story that you've got a lot of time invested in, and I think maybe that's what Patrick Wilson wanted to do. I think somebody said it's like his Ordinary People or something, which I wouldn't go that far, but it is about that. It's about feelings. It's like a little
Ordinary People is a horror film.
Yeah, it might be a little much for this, but it is. I do think you can see that it's really about a father and son who are totally estranged now. They don't even. He's not even a very nice person, the Patrick Wilson character. But then you quickly start to go, oh, it's probably because huge parts of his life were chunks. He doesn't remember going psycho in part 2. Like, he doesn't remember becoming that way. And so he has no idea, but something from the other side is now appearing to him in his life. So basically the fractions of the memories are starting to affect both of them. And the son is at art school doing paintings and seeing it come through. And so it's like two parallel storylines the whole movie. And there's some cool stuff. Again, interesting that it made so much money. It's like a very interesting, like, and I mean, I didn't know this till a couple days ago, and I looked up, this is like the #1 horror film of the year so far, like financially. And I was like, whoa, what? And so it just shows it has legs. And I'm glad it's not just a reboot or something, like a lot of Blumhouse's recent have been these big reboots of and that's,
well, technically it still is kind of the IP, like that
but it's an original IP, which is cool.
Like, yeah, it's still an original IP.
But yeah, I liked it. Again, I think it's worth watching on VOD. Again, don't expect necessarily the scariest of the series, but there was some good stuff in it. And if you like the story, good closer.
Excellent. Okay, well, I am going to take us, I will say quickly, because we're going to talk about this in the second half when we bring in our shark experts. I saw Meg 2, The Trench, which I unapologetically thought was a blast. It was not, the greatest movie ever made. I wouldn't call it particularly smart. If you're going in expecting full Ben Wheatley, it's not full Ben Wheatley. It's not Kill List, y'all. It's very much a giant shark movie. But that said, I had a blast. My kids had a blast. Another really good gateway horror, but we'll get deeper into that one in the second half. Where I will take us from here, I watched Hypnotic. This one just came to Amazon.
Ben Affleck?
Yeah, Ben Affleck. This is Robert Rodriguez's new one. And I had seen it kind of listed as like horror action, and it's got horror notes. I'm going to call it horror adjacent. Like the opening, the first act feels really horror. And then it kind of goes off on a different tangent and gets really far away from that and goes far more sci-fi and cerebral. I love the first act. After that, it lost me a little bit. So the setup of this is that this guy is investigating, he's a cop, he's a detective, and his daughter has gone missing. And so that happened a while ago. You think he's kind of, he still hasn't recovered from it, but there is this series of murders happening around him that have these really mind-bending effects, like things that couldn't happen. People just, like a cop just randomly out of the blue starts shooting people, and just things that just seem completely out of place. And then suddenly at one of the crime scenes, he's investigating a bank robbery. Something that he finds connects the crimes back to his missing daughter. And at that point, I was like, fuck yeah, I'm hooked. And then you realize, and this is taking you right up to where I'd say kind of the first act shifts just a bit and it really picks up speed. You realize that there's a pusher element to it, that it's the idea that if I tell you something, you're going to immediately believe it to be true. And you learn this like 15 minutes into the movie, so it's not a huge plot twist, but the idea of that if I was to suddenly say, go downstairs and get a glass of water, Elric, that you would immediately do it because I have that capability. And that comes into play really early. And then it continues for about another 20 minutes and I loved it. And then it starts kind of becoming, and it gets trippy, like a snake eating its own tail, where it's constantly reinventing what you think you've seen. And that's where I started getting confused. And that's what most of the critics that I read said the same, like, the hook at the beginning, like the serial killer, and it was like good. And then once you started kind of unraveling everything, it fell apart some. There were moments of this film that I absolutely loved. And then the ending didn't hit very well for me, but there were moments in the first half that I thought were really, really cool. I don't think it did very well because it was at some point supposed to do a theatrical, I believe. And then it just kind of ended up like I just saw it pop up on Amazon one day. And I don't think this did a theatrical. If it did, it was very limited. But it's there. Robert Rodriguez, I will still watch anything that he directs. And Ben Affleck was good in it. So Hypnotic, if you're into your weird kind of mind-bendery sci-fi, this might be your jam. Yeah,
it looked Inception-y in the trailer. I remember.
It's very Inception-y.
Yeah. Okay. I have a slasher for people, a new one, Screambox original that I was very curious by because it's, I'm always curious to see the slasher format in a different country. And this is Lithuania, which I don't
Oh,
even know if I've seen a Lithuanian horror
you
film.
just
But
piqued my interest.
yeah, Lithuanian horror, brand new on the app called We Might Hurt Each Other. That's the English name that I saw it under. Then when I looked it up, it was coming up under Pensive. But so brand new. It's
We
this
Might
film this
Hurt
year.
Each Other is a damn good title. I would never go
Yeah.
with pensive.
Yeah, Pensive is a little weird. Jonas Truckmans. Anyway, this one, it opens. I mean, it's very slickly made. It's not a low budget film. It feels like a slick, like Hollywood slasher in a lot of ways. It's graduation day at the school in Lithuania, and all the same types of people. Really, it's all the same types we'd expect. But the difference is the main jock guy who's going to be drafted to the NBA. He has organized a massive party for everyone, and at the last second, the house he's going to rent for it has fallen through. And there's this quiet, more interior character who wasn't going to go to the party, and his mom's a real estate person, and he hears about a house she's trying to sell that's vacant, and the deal falls through. So he kind of hears that and basically tells them all, I have the place, so he can be the hero for a moment. So all these kids, and we're talking 30 something more graduating seniors, all go to this cottage in the middle of nowhere, and they're really going far out there, and they don't know where it is. They think he knows what it is, and he doesn't. He gets out there, and this is where it's interesting for a beat. It turns out it used to belong to this artist, and so there's all this folk horror art, like all these wooden statues that are covering their faces. So it's super eerie straight away. It's more like a folk horror movie, and they're everywhere. And so this guy, and then it's this one girl who's like the arty girl. She's like, oh yeah, he was a famous artist, went crazy and killed his family. Like, of course. And they're all kind of joking about it, and no one's taking it seriously. They start having their parties, and the techno's hitting, and the biggest jock guy is like, he's like, well, yeah, I don't have any firewood. And he's like, well, whatever, let's cut up one of the statues. And you're just like, oh, that's not a good idea. And so they cut up a statue, and then stuff starts getting weird. Like, you can't tell if it's a slasher for a beat or if it is folk horror, because there's a couple weird things with the statues. But basically, a guy shows up with a mask, very Jason-esque, and probably he's the artist, I would assume. But they don't go into much more like the build-up is a lot, and once the slashing begins, it's just a kind of unrelenting slasher. And at the first, there's a couple kills quietly where not everyone sees, but then it just kind of goes to town. And right in the middle, there's a great sequence. It doesn't really match spoiling because it's fun how they do it. They're just like all hiding from the killer in the house. You're like all standing next to each other, looking out the window, and fuck it, he comes in anyway, and it's all on. So it's not like you're getting to hide. It's just like a slasher going for it. Kind of like the Chainsaw Massacre scene of the new one where he's in the bus. It reminded me of that. It has some really cool stuff. It's well made. It's slick. It takes a character shift in the last act that I really didn't like emotionally, that I was just like, oh, it felt like it came too soon. And it personally took me out. That said, at the end, it was kind of the point of the movie. So I don't want to, I won't ruin that for you guys. But I think people will dig it. I think it's a good pickup for Screenbox because it's, it just illuminates that these kind of movies are being made everywhere. So I thought it was pretty interesting. Worth a check. So that is We Might Hurt Each Other.
Now on Screenbox.
It's on the Screenbox.
Okay, I'm going to go to my smaller indie. I didn't know this film existed, but found it streaming. And then I'll jump back to kind of my cool big TV series of the summer. This is Gatlopp Game of Hell, which is currently on Tubi. So this one was definitely not on my radar until one of my students was like, you need to watch this. You're going to love it. 2022 film directed by Alberto Belli. Never heard of him. Never heard of any of his prior works. Was not familiar with anybody who was in the movie, but it was clearly shot in LA because it is very much a movie about LA. And it's hilarious. The whole setup is that a group of old friends, they've known each other for a really long time, but they have not hung out within the past couple of years. Like two of them got married, some of them got these big careers. One of them's kind of a movie star now. They've definitely drifted apart. But the one who got married is now going through this really heavy bad divorce. And so the group of friends have decided to get together for this one night. They're going to drink and they're going to do what they used to do, which was play board games. And one of the friends has found this somewhere from Europe. It was like a Swedish board game that no one's ever heard of. And it was the only copy of it on eBay and no one's ever heard of it before. And so he purchases it for them to play that night. And it is called Gatlopp. And so they start playing, and you get from the beginning that there is certain amounts of not drama, but there's background between some of the characters. Like some of them have hooked up before and some of them had crushes on other people and things like that. But as they start playing the game, it becomes kind of like a horror version of Jumanji, where things start happening and it's telling them to do things. Like it'll just say like, hold hands with the person on your left, but then they won't be able to stop. And it starts kind of controlling their world. And it's real subtle at first, and then it keeps going from there. It is hilarious. I loved this. It definitely goes horror at times. It never goes full horror. Like there's no massacre coming, but it's definitely got some moments where they're pushing the gore, they're pushing the scares, things like that. Really funny. And what struck me the most about this one was how well written it was. I watch a lot of Tubi horror, and a lot of it kind of being the directed Tubi horror. Some of it's kind of hit or miss, but this one was just really clever in its delivery. Hit a lot of really nice notes for me. So I definitely wanted to give it some love. Gatlopp, Game of Hell.
Okay. I feel like I heard about it at a festival a long time ago, but maybe I'm thinking of something else. I saw a triple feature of Trips with Psychos, but I'm going to do two of them together quickly because they kind of speak to each other. I'm not going to go deep. First was Sympathy for the Devil, which is the new kind of action-y film set in Vegas with Nick Cage and Joel Kinnaman, where I was sure the advertising for this was Nick Cage plays the devil. And I
swear I've heard that marketing too.
I read that, heard it. And unfortunately for me, it meant everything until the last 2 minutes of this movie was I was literally waiting for him to be the devil, for him to reveal, actually, I'm the devil. Like the whole movie. Like, because the movie lines up to be that. Like, it could be that at any moment. Now, forgetting that, for all of you listening, you can now have a pure experience with this movie. I actually rather like this movie. Joel Kinnaman is well cast. He's like this normal guy. He's trying to get to his wife is having a baby. He's trying to get to the hospital in Vegas. He's driving through the town. He gets into the parking lot, and he kind of in his rearview mirror he sees Nick Cage in total Nick Cage form. He's got like red dyed hair and a nice like Vegas leather jacket. He's smoking, and before he can get out of his car, he just turns around and he's in the back of the car. He's just entered, and he pulls out a gun and says, "You're going to drive me somewhere." And Joel Kinnaman is like, "I need to get inside because my wife." He's like, "Nope, you're going to drive me somewhere." And it becomes a road movie between these two guys. I'm not going to say much about it because there's obviously a mystery that is developing from the start to end between them and why this is happening in terms of what is Nick Cage character motivation. But the reason it's worth watching is there's like a 15 to 20 minute sequence in the middle of this movie, or towards the middle, in a diner that is just fucking awesome and pure Cage, like uncut. His character gets to go, he takes over a diner and he goes to town, and it's really funny. It's great. The way it's shot is great. It's just it's the rest of it is good because it's 2-person driving around talking kind of movie, Collateral and films like that. But this one part of the film made it worth watching to me. And I think Cage is doing really good work. And as you know, I'm a big fan. I don't watch his direct to TV type stuff almost ever. Not a diss on that. I just don't watch it because it doesn't grab me. I think this is a step above that stuff. So I think it is worth watching. And the reason I'm pairing it with something is because it's basically structurally the exact same thing, but a very different movie. I watched last night. I didn't realize that Carter Smith, who we had just had on the show, had a second movie this year. Yeah, yep. I didn't know he had another film, and it
just came out.
Yeah, but I mean, 2 films this year. Look, here's the thing. I was writing down because as I was watching it, and I've been thinking about these 2 films and the one he made that I mentioned on the show, the one that has the boy's name in it,
The Bug Life, or it's Bugs, and the boy's name. I can't remember the name of it either.
The thing I like about his films, it's not just the movies or the story. There's something in the way things look. The cars are broken down, the houses are crumbling. Like he obviously goes out of his way to set his films in these worlds, and I find that to be, on a directing level, I really think he's a great underappreciated right now working director. And just this one cemented it for me. I really enjoyed this film with one of my favorite working actors right now, Mr. Smile himself, Kyle Goldner, who is literally just on a roll of like 3 or 4 really good roles, anyway, so this is it opens at a kind of almost like a cartoonish hamburger joint which hasn't opened yet. 3 people are working there. One guy's a total dick. The Kyle Goldner character is completely quiet, just mopping the floor, doesn't talk to anyone, moody. And then this guy who's great, the lead is Johnny Berchtold, and he is like the quiet, passive guy. It doesn't really talk to people. You have asshole boss guy comes in and tells the quiet guy, "I'm thinking about giving you a leg up here," and then the boss goes back to watching porn in the back. He's that kind of guy. And the other young guy comes out and just starts bullying the main character and really treating him like shit and makes him eat this old hamburger just to impress his girlfriend. It's just kind of a grotesque bullying kind of scene. And the whole time Gallner's just watching it, in the background. And I'm going to go, if you don't want to hear anything about this movie, but this is how you can get into this movie. It's hard to sell this movie without me going up to this. But Gallner just walks outside. The camera tracks with him, stalks him, follows him to his car. He gets a shotgun. He comes in and he just shoots the bully, blows him away, blows away his girlfriend.
Wow.
And then blows away just kills everyone. And then looks at the kind of quiet guy and goes, all right, get in the car. You're coming with me. I'm gonna try to teach you something about your life. You're too fucking passive. And it becomes this like hostage drama way. So kind of like the other movie where he's trying to change this guy's life, trying to help him see. But the problem is the Kyle Gallner character is so essentially fucked up. It's quite a sad character by the end. There's some really interesting beats you learn about them, but he's so fucked up. He's the one who really should have probably needed to learn something. It's on a character level. Some of the things they do together. It's just one day. It's the one day they're spending together driving after committing a homicide. And I really liked it. The very end, like the last few minutes, a little generic, compared to if it had ended a little differently, I probably would have been like, holy shit. But up until then, it's a really worthwhile watching film. And like I said, I think Carter Smith does a really good job directing it. And I literally wrote to Gallner after seeing it. I just said, there's no more Thunderlift because you are stealing all of it, man. Like I've seen like 4 movies in a row where he is the best thing going right now. A lot of people probably only seen him in Smile, but I'm telling you, some of the other movies I've seen him in lately, it just shows that he is like trying to get interesting roles, like in indie films and stuff. He's just killing it. So very excited to keep seeing him grow. But it was funny to see these 2 films back to back because structurally they're very similar to people driving together, learning about each other, but their execution is opposite. So, but I recommend both of them. They're fun.
Well, I'm going to take us to a very different thing.
Okay.
I am going to take us to The Horrors of Dolores Roach, which this is a TV show that is now running on Amazon. And I had a connection with this because many, many years ago, this is probably close to 10, maybe 8 years ago now, I was doing consulting for a studio. And I can't say which one because I signed like a book of NDAs. But part of my consulting job with them was I was listening to all of these different fiction podcasts and I was I was basically doing coverage on fiction podcasts, trying to figure out which ones they might want to pick up the IP from, like which ones did I think had potential to be moved into like a TV or a film version. And so at the time when I was doing that, I had listened to the Horrors of Dolores Roach podcast and I had like glowed about it. Absolutely loved it. The studio wasn't interested in that particular one, but other one was because it got picked up by Amazon and became, I believe it's an 8 episode and it says first season. So I don't know if they're going to bring it back in any capacity. It is great. It is a horror comedy and it's a horror comedy in the sense of like a Little Shop of Horrors, a Sweeney Todd, a Pushing Daisies. These are not going to be for everyone. When I say horror comedy, it's not like a Cabin in the Woods or an Evil Dead. This is very much a theatrical kind of self-aware, oversaturated kind of otherworldly feel to it. But I absolutely loved it. Like it has like a Tim Burton-y feel, I'll say, is kind of the best way I could equate it. Where it is, and Eduardo Sanchez even directed some of the episodes of this. So yeah, it's a really tight first season. It opens with this woman on stage performing this absolutely bloody play where she's surrounded by body parts and she's pretending to be this character, Dolores Roach, and the audiences go crazy. And she exits and she's in the dressing room and she's covered in blood talking about, yeah, I really channeled her. And you find out that Dolores Roach is this serial killer that she has made a stage play about. And she's playing Dolores Roach. It's like a one-woman show. And everybody leaves and she starts to take her makeup off. And suddenly out of the shadows, the real Dolores Roach emerges and is like, everything that you're doing on stage is bullshit. I'm going to tell you my real story. You're going to sit there and listen. And it immediately takes you into the story of Dolores Roach, who is this woman who lives in Washington Heights with her boyfriend, and she is having a great life. And she gets arrested on kind of a built up, pointless drug assaulting a cop charge that doesn't even really exist. Like she didn't really do it, but she serves 16 years for it. By the time she emerges, Washington Heights has been completely gentrified. The neighborhood is completely different, except for an empanada shop that she used to shop at, that she used to get her empanadas from. She moves into the basement of it, and basically it becomes kind of a Sweeney Todd with empanadas. And she's a masseuse. She learns to give massages in prison. That's how she says that, like, that's how she got herself out of situations, is even the toughest bitch, she could like turn to jello as soon as she started rubbing her shoulders. And so she's giving massages. So it's kind of like, instead of a barber, she's a masseuse. Instead of meat pies, it's empanadas, but it's that same horror comedy theatrical setup. I loved the show. I love the podcast. I think the show is an awesome TV version of it. It is this, and it's star-studded. It's got like, even just cameos, like Mark Maron's in it as their evil landlord, Cyndi Lauper in it. Brian Fuller is like a theater critic in the first episode. And I found out it's because it has such a strong Pushing Daisies feel. The showrunner was I believe one of the writers on Pushing Daisies. And so it's just got that feel to it. This just kind of bigger, larger than life, fantasy feel to it. But I've been having a blast with it. It is straight horror comedy. So, Horrors of Dolores Roach. No one is talking about it. So I'm hoping somebody else out there likes it enough to keep it going a little bit and give it some love. And this is on Amazon Prime right now.
Well, that's good, because my last one's a streamer too. And really, okay, I usually rely on you to tell me if a new movie that hits Netflix is any good. Because to be honest, I think I'm basically done with like new Netflix movie. I just don't care anymore, and they're almost never been good. And I just don't even bother pushing play unless somebody really recommended it. Last night I saw there was a new one on there. I was like, okay, and I looked on Letterboxd, and there weren't any reviews except there was one glowing review, and I was like, all right, maybe I'll check it out. And that is the new remake, very loose on the term remake, The River Wild. This is for you. This was one of the nicest surprises I've had all year. This movie is tight. It's taut. It's actually kind of ugly at times in terms of what's going on. It is not a real remake of Curtis Hanson's River Wild, but it is a remake of they did take the script and they took elements of the journey, but not the character stuff. It's a totally different story. The action directing of them going down the river stuff is really good. I mean, look, it's not like, oh my God, it's the best film of the year, but I was like, okay, this is so much better than I thought. The reason I watched it was because Adam Brody's in it. And Adam Brody's just one of those young actors. Or young, he's my age probably, but he seems young to me now because he was in the OC. Gent. Yeah, he was in the OC. I just think he's been good in everything he's been in lately. In this, I've never seen him play like the bad guy. He's the fucked up, been in prison kind of character, which was interesting. So it's a sibling played by Leighton Meister is her name. She's coming home. And she's a doctor. She's coming home to see her brother, who's a bit of a fuck up and used to be kind of involved in the drug world. But he works at this river rafting place that's very successful. And he's convinced her to come down on a weekend raft, and she's excited to see him again. She sees him. There's these two British girls who are going to be on the trip. And then the Adam Brody character shows up, and she looks like, oh, she wasn't ready for this. And it's the best friend of her brother. There's clearly a history between her and this guy, but she doesn't kind of say what it was. And they kind of let it slow burn. But, the brother's like, he'll be fine. He's been out jail. He's totally cool. Everything, it's like, okay, great. And they go down this raft and go down on the raft kind of Deliverance style. And as they go, something happens that changes the group dynamics and makes things super tense for the rest of the movie. I'm not going to reveal it. You're going to have to listen for yourself. But it was just like, it's been years for me that I would blind watch something on Netflix that I actually liked. And I don't mean that as a total assault on the company, like pickups and stuff, sure. But when it says like Netflix on top of it, it's just, I don't know, rare for me.
Wow. Okay. So, by the way, Adam Brody is your age. So just
which is hilarious. Which is hilarious. He's killing it because he looks great.
I just looked it up. He is your age.
But when I was watching the OC, he seems like a kid. So I guess the OC I was watching probably when I was his age. Yeah. Anyway, it is very strange. But he doesn't. He looks younger.
You never watched Hellhole? That was the other Netflix one that I was like, this is amazing. That was. I know there's
good stuff. This isn't a diss on. I'm talking about everyone has their own relationship with streamers. I watch a lot more stuff on Amazon just because I eclectic it is. But like for some reason, usually the ones that say Netflix, I usually maybe you get burned twice and then you're like but this is a really good late night, go in low expectations and have actually a really good tight thriller.
I remember seeing the original one when I was in high school. I mean, that was like mid 90s and it was great. So okay, I'm in. I
think you would like this. There's a few people I know when I was watching go, oh yeah, this is definitely a few people will dig this movie.
I will quickly say, speaking of Netflix, Bird Box Barcelona, it was by no means my favorite film of the summer, but it did something different. Like it was very much trying to take a much different approach than the first Bird Box. And so in that, if you liked that world, I at least enjoyed watching it, and I liked kind of seeing the different perspective and how it worked it. So that existed. Black Mirror, if you have not checked it out yet, they were all reasonably decent episodes. Lock Henry, fucking amazing. It was like straight up serial killer, like horror piece. And I also really liked Demon 79 is like full, like conjuring a demon. Really, really fun one.
How many episodes was this new season? Because I haven't started yet. Okay, I'll make that my next thing because I love Black
I think
Mirror,
it was 5 or 6. So yeah. Lock Henry was by far my favorite. I know a lot of people really like Beyond the Sea. That one wasn't as much of a thing for me, but I loved Lock Henry and Demon 79. And I will also say the other thing that I did a lot of this summer was read books. I've probably got 10 different horror novels that I read this summer so far, but I'm saving that for next episode because we're having an author on. So next next episode, I will be doing my summer horror book reports and give you kind of the ones that everybody should read and the ones that, were just okay.
Yeah, I got a couple books, but I was spending a lot of my time reading this Michael Cimino biography, which I just become obsessed with because anybody who lives like a lifestyle that is very mysterious, I find always intriguing. So I did read one horror book that I'll mention, and I got one that I'm excited to read. So
save them for next week.
I'll save it. Okay.
Well, let's bring on our guests. I am so excited to hear from them because I'm part of the movie and I love everything they do. So let's bring on our guests for tonight.
Tonight's episode is brought to you by The Handyman Method by Nick Cutter, author of the best-selling novel The Troop, and Andrew F. Sullivan is on sale now. For fans of Black Mirror and the Amityville, this is a chilling domestic story of terror. Richard Chismar, best-selling author of Chasing the Bogeyman, says The Handyman Method is nightmare territory. Cutter and Sullivan have created a modern masterpiece. The Handyman Method by Nick Cutter and Andrew F. Sullivan is available wherever books are sold. I've read one of his books that you're reading right now, The Deep, and we are both fans, right?
Always love his stuff, so I'm excited for this one.
Me too.
Well, everyone, it is my esteemed pleasure to welcome our guests for the night. They've been guests on multiple iterations of our shows before. I think we last had you on when I was doing Nightmare University, and we talked about aquatic horrors. But I am thrilled to welcome back Josh Miller and Stephen Scarlata with their new documentary that's now on Shudder, Sharksploitation.
Good to be here. This is the voice of Josh.
Steve, thank you for having us.
Well, plus they're podcast hosts in their own right with Movies Never Made. So yeah, that is, you guys have been doing this for a while now.
'Tis true. We're back. We're on a long hiatus while, well, I'd say we, but mostly Steve finished up Sharksploitation, but we're back in action.
So what's the first film back?
It was Jaws 3, People Zero.
Oh, totally.
Tied into the doc. And now we're also, we just started last week a 3-part episode series on the unmade versions of The Meg.
Oh, there are unmade versions.
Oh, many unmade
versions. Oh, shit, y'all. So
Jan de Bont tried to make one for a long time.
Oh my gosh. Has anybody attempted Hell's Aquarium? Because that's the one that I'm like just giddy waiting for.
Well,
no,
just
they're
the first
stuck
movie.
On the first one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we dig into Sharksploitation, I have to get y'all's kind of read on the Meg 2 because I seem to be the only person in the world who thought it was an absolute blast.
No, Joe Lynch. I saw Joe Lynch give it 4 stars, and he was unapologetic. And then I saw what's the guy who started for Alan Jones from Fright Fest called on Ben Wheatley to hang up his boots, basically, that he hated it so much. So there's polls out there. There's a poll.
I have seen, because I took my kids we went to a matinee. We went to like a 12 o'clock show on opening day, took my kids. I left it. I was like, it's not the smartest thing you're going to see this summer, but God damn it, I enjoyed it and shoved popcorn in my face. My kids cheered the whole time. Giant octopus scene, like my son was screaming. And then as soon as I post up, like, oh my God, I thought it was so fun. All I hear is it sucked. This was terrible. So, okay, guys, hot take from both of you shark experts.
Well, I know Steve loved it. Have you seen it twice already, Steve?
I want to see it in 3D, but it looks like tomorrow's the last chance I could see it in 3D because I only saw it. I saw it normal style, but I loved it. I absolutely. because I kept seeing the reviews. I'm like, oh, and they're saying the first half is awful and then the second half is good. And then I was watching it and I was like, wait a second, I like the first half. So for me, it's like, I guess I'm used to watching lots of Chinese monster movies, and like opening scene is Statham doing martial arts, and okay, I was happy. And then I saw like Jin Woo in this like underwater mech suit doing something. I got even happier, and then 20 minutes in, I was like, "This is a Chinese monster movie," and I got so excited because it's all the things that are in Chinese monster movies, but it was like a big budget version of it. So, dude, it was like catnip for me. I was so happy watching that movie.
That was my take as well. Even bringing in the extra creatures with no fucking explanation whatsoever. Just we're putting more creatures in it. Like that for me felt such like a Chinese monster movie where suddenly like just a giant catfish comes out, and not in this one, but that's in a lot of, it's a thing in Chinese shark movies where they'll add in extra creatures too.
Can you feel of the Ben Wheatley of it at all? That was the thing I was curious about.
I felt no Ben Wheatley.
Okay.
But that's neither in like a critique or just like I feel like he was either not allowed to be Ben Wheatley or he didn't want to. I mean, maybe he was trying to prove that he could do something, but I expected it to be more like Doctor Strange 2. I knew it wasn't going to be a Ben Wheatley movie, but I thought it would be the kind of thing where just every now and then there would just be a 5-minute scene that was pure Ben Wheatley, even though I had a hard time picturing how that would exist in a Meg movie. So I'm not surprised.
Except the humor, maybe like Free Fire is really funny. Like Free Fire, the comedy and the staging of the character. So I thought maybe the characters were shaped a little more.
I guess I can see some of that. Free Fire specifically.
I mean, like his recent film, I think it came out during the pandemic, High Rise. Like that's a much bigger budget kind of actiony sequences. But I don't know how you're going to get like Kill List or Field in England into a Meg 2 movie. Like it's just not there. Or in the earth. It does have cool sequences, and you do still feel some of the Ben Wheatley humor. Like there's a lot of kind of, somebody says something and then the opposite happens type, humor that I always felt was part of Ben Wheatley. There's a sense of Kill List type dark humor along with it. Not quite as dark as Kill List, obviously.
I think it would be hard because again, unlike Sam Raimi and Doctor Strange 2, I'm not really sure how the Meg as a franchise could have allowed for a purer version of a sudden 5-minute Ben Wheatley scene where there's very little happening and just there's like a rumbling bass that makes you nauseous and all the Kill List kind of stuff.
Hey, if it helps him keep making his own movies, because it did really well at the box office. Between that and Insidious Red Door, I saw the numbers on Red Door and I was like, holy shit. Like that was blowing the doors off. That was like one of the number one films.
This past calendar year, it'll be curious how long this keeps going, but kind of starting with Smile. Just this entire past year has been...
It helped to have some good ones in a row. I think there's a couple of really solid movies.
But horror has definitely been overperforming based on like analyst expectations.
Wait, Josh, did you say horror's back? It's horror back.
Horror's back, y'all. It's back.
Been gone.
We never went anywhere.
Long, and now it's back.
No, that was because I just
call it a comeback.
Yeah.
I just finished my horror class that I do every summer at USC, my big horror production class. And I had because part of it is kind of like, anticipating where trends are going to be and who's going to see what. And on the very first day of class, I had my students rank which one they thought would be bigger, Haunted Mansion, Meg 2, or Talk to Me. And everybody was kind of like, Talk to Me is going to be like a sleeper, but I didn't even include Insidious Red Door on that list. And, it's doing great. So,
So it just, and also it's like, I know some people will shit on that in the sense they'll be like, oh, but it's still IP, but started as an original, in-house, very weird IP. Like the first Insidious and first two, I like the second one a lot.
Yeah.
They're so wacky. And so it's just, I don't know. We'll talk about it more at the start, but all good things for those of us who love horror. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into some Sharksploitation here, because I've known for a long time that you guys are huge aquatic horror fans, specifically in the Sharksploitation realm. But where did the idea of the documentary come out of okay, let's make an entire historical piece about them?
Steve, I know where it began for me, which was just Steve talking about shark movies, and that Steve had this idea that it'd be cool to do a documentary and I just kind of felt it was one of those moments where I'm like, how long has Steve been telling people at parties that he wanted to do this? Maybe he finally just needs someone like me to be like, let's fucking do it. I'm in. Let's get going.
Yeah, pretty much. I remember I think I told you when we went for coffee, because for a brief second, we're like, can we do a book? But then it definitely turned into the doc. I knew I wanted to do it after Dune for sure, because even at Cannes, I was definitely bringing it up to people. But back then, I didn't know what to do with it. I just wanted it to be all a clip show. And then eventually, I just kept outlining it. Then I figured out the Peter Benchley angle, and then talking to Josh, and then of course it was and Jim also. I was
Coons,
driving around with
DP.
Jim. Yeah, Jim, our DP, Jim Coons. I was driving around with him doing shoots for our novelization doc, and I think he just got tired of me talking about it. He's like, dude, I will shoot it, just set up the interviews. And so it was just the merging of these three things, Josh, Jim, and
so the lesson out there to aspiring filmmakers is just pester all your friends aimlessly
and surround yourself with action people.
Steve.
Yeah.
People. Yes. Well, I remember having Steve. I remember when you came on one of my favorite early episodes of my other podcast, Pure Cinema, and we did ripoffs. And I remember a lot of shark films were on your list, a couple that I hadn't seen at the time. And so I've been excited about this for a long time, but I wasn't involved in this. And I watched it a couple weeks ago. We haven't really spoken, and I thought Bekah was great. And I thought the talking heads were used better than I'd seen in any film for quite a long time, because they all had something to add. Not just, they weren't repeating the same bullet points, and they weren't all the same type of person. You had academics, you had marine biologists, but what I really appreciated wasn't what I expected. Actually, I thought it was going to be, I would love it because of all the deep cuts kind of film, right? That was my expectation with you. Instead, it was actual historical context was so strong, and the storyline, I knew half of that had never thought about, like why these films outside of Jaws phenomenon. My brain had never gone, oh, but then what happens in the next phase, and then the next phase, and it was so well laid out like that. So when did the structure of what this film, because you could go a million ways with it, when did that start to emerge?
I feel like it was because Steve's got all these movies in his head already, and I feel it was like very early on, just when I was trying to do my job of being like, well, so what is the movie? It's easy enough to say, let's make a movie about shark movies, but Jodorowsky's Dune had a beginning, middle, and an end. Like, it's obvious what that. There could have been a mediocre version of the same story. The fact that they actually got Jodorowsky to tell his own story is part of what made that so special. But nonetheless, beginning, middle, and end. Shark movies don't have a beginning, middle, and end. We're talking about one that came out after the movie premiered. So it was kind of like, what is this? As you were saying, the Peter Benchley and his arc of real, like, feeling guilty was one thing, but to me, what really stuck out was Steve was like, well, I don't want it to be one of those, it was like a VH1 special of like, I love the 90s, but where you're just like, and this was Jaws, and then this movie came next, and then this one, and then that one, and then you get like comedians and people to just like talk about the movies and say funny things, and sometimes those movies can be great. If there's inherently more to it, like horror noir, I think that has like a deeper thing. Or Queer for Fear or something like it. There's more to talk about beyond just sequentially going through the movies. And I think it was kind of getting Steve to think about, well, how do I make that different?
Yeah, no, totally. It was, I did not want to do just a genre documentary, as Josh is saying. I think that one of my favorite documentaries is a documentary called American Nightmare. Adam Simon did. Yeah, so that documentary I remember watching, and it was like blowing my mind. Like, I didn't know that. And we did a whole list. I put every shark movie ever made on an Excel sheet that kind of became an outline. Is over 200. So I think right now, what is it? Because I also have movies that weren't almost pre-production and all that shit. I'm definitely over 200.
And I feel a huge percentage of those are just from the past 20 years. Because once like Sci-Fi and Asylum, and now as you're saying, these Chinese movies, it used to be that you were lucky to get a shark movie a year. And then there's been phases where we've had like 12 shark movies a year.
Let me ask you: is Toilet Shark on that list?
Is Toilet Shark on this? You know what? I gave up after I finished the movie.
I don't believe. I believe we looked it up and found that
you
it
just
didn't
gave
exist.
up.
It is.
That was a horror. That's a horror trivia inside joke. That was my.
Okay.
Can
gotcha.
you pick the fake?
But
I love that.
yeah.
After that, somebody looked it up, and isn't there currently a
Yeah.
Kickstarter
It was
going
a
to make?
Kickstarter for it.
Rolf Konevsky was on our team, and he was like, "You know what, guys? I'm pretty sure somebody's trying to make this movie right now." And there it was. So
Yeah.
And don't get it confused with Amityville Death Toilet, which is on Tubi right now.
Never.
Wow. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
but-
of course it is. There's a mirror, there's a doll. You've got all the other things from the Amityville house. Of course you need the toilet to go too.
Hell yeah. But yeah, Josh is right, because we pitched this thing to a lot of people who were not interested. Josh, myself, and Carrie Dignam Roy, our other producer, who produced this awesome documentary about the shower
psycho shower scene.
Yeah, she was
and
awesome.
Memory, the alien movie, right?
So Philippe, the director, Philippe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she
so-
works for, or is involved with this company in a lot of
gotcha.
projects.
Yeah, so she produced this with us, and we pitched this thing so many times, and one person just kind of said, like, they don't even make these movies anymore. And then I went and I started counting, and it's like after Sharknado, as Josh is saying, in like 2015 there was 12, 2016 there was 12, another 12 shark movies, 2017 8, 2018 9, 2019 one shark movie, 47 meters down uncaged, and then in 2021's the record 18 shark movies came out.
I was
And
the
those-
person who said that somehow wasn't aware of even like The Shallows or 47.
Yeah,
like, those
like-
are major box office.
Oh my god, I got so angry. It's like it was like
And
almost
Steve
like,
doesn't get angry easy.
yeah,
So
it's like no, because it was almost like it got to a point where it was like, are people meeting with us just to turn us down? And then I started making that list. So the next time, think no one ever brought it up again, but I was like, I was ready with.
I'm
the
ready. I got
statistics.
an email ready to go with this.
Yeah, like you're wrong.
bring it, motherfuckers.
There's a lot of, but Josh is right. Like starting after Sharknado is when they just started to like explode. Multiple movies, way more than multiple movies a year.
Plus the Nature Channel, the Shark Week, and all these things have been never been more popular, right? I mean, it's through the roof.
And I love that you all included that, because that one for me, the one that you specifically focused on was, and this was like a huge game changer in Shark Week, where Shark Week for decades has always just had coverage of shark documentaries. This one's on tiger sharks. This one's on this cool sharks in South Africa that jump out of the water. And then what was the year that they did the Meg documentary? It's like 2008 or somewhere around there. It was a while ago, but that said, suddenly they make this what feels like a mockumentary and kind of Ghost Watch style about hunting a Meg. But Shark Week presents it. This is coming from Discovery Channel. They present it in a very Ghost Watch style, as if Megs are real and they're going to look for them. And holy shit, what was that? And it's filmed, real shaky cam. So if you're just a standard average viewer watching it, it's wedged in between these shark documentaries. You're like, wait a sec, did the Discovery team just go hunting a Meg and find one? Like, that's what it felt like to the average viewer. And I remember at the time being like, this is wild. Like, I was working at Fangoria and we covered it as a horror film. And we never covered Shark
did you
Week up to
know
that
it was
point.
fake when you watched it?
I did, but that said, I don't think, but that's because I'm obsessed with this.
When I saw
like,
Peter Jackson's Forgotten Silver,
yeah.
it was
That
like
one-
20 minutes into the movie when I was finally, I feel like they cut to a shot that this guy invented a camera that was run by like a locomotive train.
Yep.
And I was like, what the fuck? This isn't, what is this?
Okay,
Show
that
it to
one
18-year-olds.
threw me.
They all believe it every
That
time.
one threw me. I remember being like 20 minutes into it and being like, oh my God, how come we've never heard of this filmmaker?
Who's this amazing man?
This amazing man.
Well,
No,
part
that
of it, I
one-
think, is,
that one I bought.
You put Leonard Moulton in there, and you just don't think he's going to be joking. Like, it's
Yeah.
Leonard Moulton. It must
It's
be
Leonard
real.
Moulton. He
It's
doesn't
like, I'm
fuck around.
sold. That was the only disappointment I had with your film, was no Leonard Moulton. I was like, man, where's Moulton on Sharks? Let's bring
that
it.
would have been a good idea.
That would have been interesting.
Oh.
I want to ask all three of you a question, including Bekah, because I don't know exactly what it means to her, but I know what it means to her now. But Jaws, the first Jaws film, first impact on all three of you when you saw it, what memory you have of seeing it for the first time, and if there was any through line for you. Because everyone's different. For me, it was The Shining was the bigger impact, not Jaws, even though I love Jaws. But I'm assuming. Let's start with Steve, and I'm going to work Bekah, Josh.
Jaws, it's like two memories. First memory was my mom never comes to the theaters, and I remember sitting next to her. This was during the re-release, and then the second time was my dad just came home from work and just grabbed me, and we drove to the mall, Sunrise Mall, and we walked because my dad would come home from work and just be like, "We're going to see Jaws," because I hadn't come on HBO yet; it would get re-released. And we walked into the theater when the raft was on the beach. And my dad was like, "Oh man, we just missed him eat the boy." And then we went and we sat down and watched the movie. My dad would come home and we just go see it. And that's like kind of my earliest memory of it. But it made me, like everyone else, obsessed.
Yeah.
Bekah. Yeah. Mine was my parents rented it on VHS when I was maybe 4 or 5, and we had, just gotten the VCR. It was a big thing. And I remember what hit me the most was the opening shot of the girl floating in the water from below, like the true thalassophobia shot. Because when I've mentioned this on the show before, I grew up on the Shenandoah River, and straight off of our dock, like we didn't have like a nice gradual slope down that you could play in, like straight off my front yard, 25 feet down. And so we swam in it every day, but suddenly I remember seeing that shot and being like, that's what I look like to whatever is at the bottom. And we have like 4 feet catfish and giant alligator gar and things like that in there. So I just remember having this, like, that's what I look like moment. And that shot, even to this day, I use that film so much in my classes. I teach it screenwriting because it's like this perfectly constructed 3-act structure. I've taught it so many times. I still cannot watch that shot without suddenly going, fuck, that's what I look like. And even just last weekend, I was in the water at the beach the whole time going, and that's what I look like, as I'm like treading in 10 feet of water. So yeah.
To sand crabs.
Yeah, I know. There were thresher shark reports in Pismo Beach while I was there.
Today, New York.
Yeah,
New York
I saw
was
that.
biting a woman in New York.
So the actual people came down while I was on the beach, and they were like, we've had thresher shark reports. They don't actually attack anybody, but just let you know that we've had reports that they're out there. And you're like, what am I supposed to do?
A thresher shark's what gives Quint one of his scars, isn't it?
Yeah. But they were like, they don't like being around people. They're going to run from you, but we've had reports. So, and how am I supposed to take that? I'm not going in 10 feet of water again.
Something
was it Hooper who had the thresher scar? No, I can't remember.
By the way, you're gonna be so psyched. They're trying to make an alligator gar movie. If you look it up on IMDb, I need to post it. Yeah, so there's a poster of it. They're trying to make it. So I
have been waiting decades for this.
You've been talking about it forever.
Much like thresher sharks, as soon as you're in the water, the gar are fucking out of there. Like they don't want anything to do with you, but they're there. So sorry. Yeah,
it's funny talking about that scene though. Quickly, the thing I start a lot of film classes with in the first year is I show the opening scene of that silently first, and because a lot of these kids haven't, 19-year-olds haven't seen it, and before I show it again with sound, I ask them what sounds they think they should be hearing, right? And like some of it's obvious, like, beach stuff and chatter and stuff. But that shot, no one's ever gotten close, because what that shot does, what is the sound of an underwater shot of legs, right? It's romantic, almost like sexy. It's got this like fantasy, like it's so strange. And I think it's what makes it's not the da that makes it. It's that intrigue, almost like a shark's being intrigued by a woman's legs. That is just such a unique choice, in a scene like that. Anyway, Josh.
I mean, as far as like the indelible things that stuck with me from the movie as a kid was, in particular, and I think I'm forgetting if it might even be Mike Gingold or someone talks about it from in our doc of the shot where you can just barely see the shark under the water when he's grabbing the boater. And then I think that's even the same scene where we cut to, you think you're watching the guy sink to the bottom, but then it's just his leg. But honestly, my strongest memory of that movie is that I wasn't really old enough to see any of them in the theater. So I watched all of them mostly on like TBS. And I feel like when any of us were kids, we're not that old. The sequels were so reviled, and especially like Jaws 3 and 4, growing up to people shitting all of them, that I feel like I was unaware that the first Jaws was good. I feel that it was still too, now people talk about it as one of the great movies of all time. But I feel like then it was all about, the jokes in Back to the Future of Jaws 19. This time it's really, really personal. And then I remember when I finally watched it beginning, middle to end, maybe even rented it. And I was like, and this is probably junior high or something. And I was just like, wait a minute. This movie's great. So that that's really my strongest mind, even though I'd seen the movie either in pieces, but I feel like there was a point where I couldn't quite remember what happened in Jaws 1 versus Jaws 2. They were similar enough that it was kind of like one big movie. Because I remember when I fully watched it, certain things that I was like, wait, he does not attack a helicopter in this? And that kind of the more ridiculous things from part two.
We're part of a generation that we would have seen the sequels more than the first one.
Totally.
From the amount, two. We've probably all seen two more than one just because it played so much.
3 was the one that I saw the most as a kid.
Part 4, because that came out right at my peak of mom didn't care what I rented from the video store. So I probably rented 4 more than any other. But I had that same scenario happen with Psycho, where I had seen part 2 and 3 so often. It wasn't until much, much later that I was like, I should watch part 1, which never really attracted me at the time because it was in black and white. And when you're 12, that's not a thing. And then I circled back and was like, oh, it's actually a classic thing. So. Yeah.
Junkaroo. You've been to Junkaroo many times.
Many times. Angry
I like
Welders.
4. I think 4's got some really fun stuff in it. I like the growl. I like it growling personally.
I like them all. I just because before 4 I saw it twice in the theaters. I remember I was so hyped.
So how beyond Jaws? So you guys definitely cover Jaws and kind of the hype and the amazing wake that Jaws kind of leaves behind it of this massive hype. But then we see this crazy onslaught of Sharksploitation films. How did you decide which ones to include? How did you decide to focus more on this one and not Tintoria or Up from the Depths or, Monster Shark or whatever? How did you decide which ones were the important kind of tent poles of it?
Yeah, that's a tough one. You can go, Josh. Yeah.
I'd say it's slightly more of a Steve question. I was going to say, from my perspective, was Steve wanted to cover every single shark movie ever made.
Yes.
And then I'd say 3 realities came in. One of the struggles in getting the interviews for this is, as we're talking about, once we realized early on that we needed to ask the interviewers more than just talking about their movie. But then we interview subjects. So we try to ask them bigger pictures about sharks and other shark movies. And some people had really interesting things to say. But we also realized very quickly that most people who made shark movies, that was not their dream in life. And they did not care about sharks as an animal. They did not think about other shark movies other than Jaws. Every single person was able to intimately talk about first seeing Jaws and loved it because it was the biggest blockbuster of all time. So we could have been asking them about Star Wars or The Godfather, but and that was when we kind of realized we needed to be getting academics and that kind of thing. But then the other 2, so that was kind of the first thing of just we don't even have information about all these shark movies. And then the other big factor was length. We realized we did not want to have a 4-hour shark movie. Maybe if it had been a TV miniseries, but I also feel just the nature of the subject matter, it's best served as a normal length feature, so it doesn't overstay its welcome. But Steve did get interviews about. We could have done 30 minutes on just Shark Attack 2, and Shark Attack 3, and ultimately focused on Bekah's favorite, just part 3.
Yeah, we had to keep dwindle it down. In front of me, I have 2 cork boards. One cork board was each decade of shark movies, and then the right one was all the subgenres. And I got different colored yarn, and I was tying it all together. My wife
God, you totally red stringed the shark movies.
He's got a conspiracy board.
Oh God,
he's trying to catch a serial killer.
Yeah, and then my wife came in one day and was like, "Dude, you've lost it." And then I was,
make sure you take a picture of that before you finally take it down, Steve.
Now it's my new outlines. Unfortunately, I wish I did. My wife was like, "Dude, you've lost it," and you got to stop. But yeah, I had, oh my God, my wall was just covered because I need to do this. And then Josh and Carrie and the editor were like, dude, because it was almost like every movie I wanted. I'm like, no, we gotta cover that. And so it ended up just being like, okay, what's the main cultural relevant shark movies? And so I kind of did a color coordinating of these ones have to be in it, like Sharknado, Mega Shark vs. Giant Octopus has to, Open Water has to, Deep Blue Sea has to, the Jaws franchise has to, and then whatever I can get in there as bonus pain, I can like slip in, like, you know, you'll thank God for Rebekah. She can drop in some cool ones, deep cuts, and have someone else. And so we can just show quick pictures and stuff like that. So that helped a lot. You were awesome, Rebekah. Thank you, by the way. I don't know if I thank you. I don't know if I thank you enough, but yeah.
You gave me a reason to rewatch a tunk. And anytime you get a reason, or a tank, I don't even know how it's.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
That is the Bollywood Jaws musical, which is quite brilliant and has an entire singing sequence right before somebody is brutally killed in the water. It's amazing.
So what beautiful. Caused you physical pain, Steve, to omit? What, like for you personally, as someone with Tintorera poster behind you, which I always like to say, come for the sharks, stay for the costume changes. That's my tagline for that movie.
It's a threesome with a shark.
I love every scene. They're wearing different costumes and it's very stylish. It's a great movie. But you've introduced me to some pretty great deep cut, like, you know, weirdo ripoff shark movies. So I'm curious which ones leaving on the floor was hard for you personally.
It was definitely Bait, and it was Shark Night 3D because we had Rebekah talk about some awesome stuff.
She talked about
She talked about the cookie cutter shark. I got David Schiffman to talk about the cookie cutter shark because there's real life cookie cutter shark attacks, and I had it all, and I had to lose that, and that killed me. There is a bunch. There's just too much I want to go through.
Wait, tell the audience, because not everyone has listened to our show for the whole time we've been doing it. Tell them about Bait, because I'm with you. I think Bait's one of the best of these new cycle. Like, because I'm not somebody who'll watch anything. Like, I won't just watch the sci-fi originals and stuff. But when I saw Bait, I was like, holy shit, high concept, ridiculous, totally worked for me. Let them know a little bit about that one, just in case.
Yeah, it's part of, there's multi subgenres in shark movies, and this is part of like the natural disaster subgenre about a tsunami that strikes and leaves survivors in a supermarket and some in a parking garage with a shark hunting them. And the Chinese just remade it as Escape from Shark.
Oh, interesting.
Escape from Shark.
So the original was Australian, right? They had like Shirley Vincent and people like that.
It's basically The Mist, but instead of a fog full of Cthulhu creatures, it's sharks.
Exactly. And I reached out to the director and stuff. They never got back to me, and I was bummed because I tried, you know. But that one, it just seems like a lot of people love it, and it seemed like, you know. And I wanted to do like I wanted to do an environmental section, but I just couldn't get to it and all that. So and
it was tough because it's easier to talk. Again, we would ask everyone to talk about their favorite shark movie. It's easier when something like Deep Blue Sea was clearly like a major point on the like timeline and evolution of shark movies and kind of impacted, or, you know, Open Water in particular. Oh, like, you know, people can talk about how that movie influenced their movie. And I feel like Bait, not enough people we talked to had seen. And it was just hard to like where you'd fit it in, because we liked it, but it's not like that changed shark movies after that.
And it's written by Russell Mulcahy, right?
Yeah, there's like 5 writers.
Oh, okay.
It's like produced by it. But Josh is right, because at one point, going through all the transcriptions and pulling everything together, it was the people that did talk about it. It was the same thing. Bait, that's good, and then that was it.
Yeah,
but they didn't get any deeper.
Honestly, it was even hard to get the shallows in. That one was just so big, and because it was a huge theatrical hit, it did influence. There's so many shallows ripoffs now, like mini budget ones. But it was tough because we just didn't have. We tried to get the filmmaker, but he was in the middle of finishing up Black Adam. And we were on a real tight deadline getting things into Shudder, and it was just nobody said anything enough about it other than like, I liked that movie. You know? I feel like we ended up using every second of meaningful conversation we had about it, which admittedly is very brief.
Yeah.
There's a Chinese version of The Shallows called
Really?
Huge Shark.
Huge Shark.
Yeah, check out Huge Shark. It's The
I'm
Shallows.
writing all these down.
Yeah.
Mr. Grumpy Shark.
I feel like one of the most fascinating things about the influence of Jaws, especially, is when it's not shark movies, but it's still Jaws. Like people, so like obviously the Grizzlies, but like we just brought up Russell Mulcahy because I was thinking Razorbacks opening is like
God.
Total.
I mean, it's brilliant, but it also just as Jaws, you know.
And
it's so beautiful.
The one that I know, when you asked me that question, the one that I said is my favorite shark movie that is not a shark is Orca. I love that movie. I still consider it to be the classiest of the entire like Sharksploitation subgenre. For me, is so classy.
Yeah. It really is.
I love that. The score, it's got that gorgeous score, like Dino De Laurentiis, and it's just the backdrop. They shot it in this beautiful like seaside village, and
Richard Harris. Yeah, you got Oscar winners, and
it's just I love that. And it's such a knockoff where like you can literally like put the characters side by side. The orca cries tears at one point. It's it's still campy as fuck, but I find it to be so classy simultaneously.
Jaws has like a perfectly replicatable structure. And we talk about people like, I think we bring up the car. Well, not I know we bring up the car in the documentary.
Oh yeah.
But it's not even just like the killer animal movies. It's really just the idea of a thing is menacing a town, and like the local government is like, but we can't cancel the Blueberry Festival because we need blueberry dollars. Because I still contend Dante's Peak, the Pierce Brosnan Linda Hamilton volcano movie, is a Jaws movie but with a volcano.
It
even kills two like skinny dippers, which on paper you'd be like, how can a volcano kill two people early in Act 1 and no one believes that a volcano did it? But that movie figured out how. This was just a boating accident equivalent, but in volcano form.
Oh wow. I don't think I've seen Volcano's Peak or Dante's Peak within the last 20 years.
Well, now you can watch it with Jaws on the mind.
Now I need to rewatch
that classic period where there's always two movies coming out at the same time, right? It was that a Volcano.
That's
definitely
right at
definitely
the same time.
Team Dante's Peak.
It was Deep Impact and Armageddon.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I like Deep Impact too. That was it's funny. But I kind of miss those days where you'd be excited about a new movie and they'd always come out in couples.
I remember that there was right at the same time there was Repo the Genetic Opera. There was Repo Man.
With
Repo,
Jude Law.
with Jude Law. And it was like
Repo Men, I guess.
That was it. And it wasn't a remake. It was actually the same concept of like organ harvesters, which was weird. And they were like simultaneous. And we just don't see that as much.
Those were the days.
the funniest of those,
internet.
To me, I always thought the funniest of those was because at least you're like, asteroid hitting the Earth. That's on people's mind because somebody talked about it, scientists or whatever. Volcanoes was, we were getting back into disaster movies. But I remember there were two movies in the same year about the like Sprinter Prefontaine. That was his last name. I forget his first
Personal
name.
Best or something. There was two of them. I remember.
You're right. Prefontaine. And one of them starred Jared Leto.
Yeah.
I just thought that was so weird because that was such a like super niche thing, and most people didn't know who this guy was, and there were two different movies about him.
So my question is always, and this kind of pulls it back to Jaws, were these happening organically? Like, was it in Armageddon, Deep Impact, both kind of being created in their own little bubble and coming into fruition at the same time? Or is it like a 1989 aquatic horror boom where The Abyss gets announced, it takes forever to make, and in the meantime, like 5 other people are like, well, fuck, let's do the same thing. And therefore we have all of these almost identical movies releasing the same year. So
I think all the ones we've been talking about just now were like, they were too far in when they learned about the other one. Because none of them are of lesser, like, like with Tombstone and Wyatt Earp, it was like Wyatt Earp was this giant 3-hour long, super expensive movie. And Tombstone, they're like, even that one, though, I don't think it was like a mockbuster. I think it was just that they had it, but they realized they could rush it and get it out first. Because even like Bug's Life and Ants, I remember those.
Oh yeah,
Yes,
But like those took
right.
like 3 years to make because they're CG movies. But you're right; those don't happen as much ananymore. They're happening like every year in the late 90s.
Maybe
that was
information
just a common
sharing's
thing.
too easy now. It seems
It
like.
might be.
Yeah.
I mean,
on our podcast, we just learned that when they announced the Meg back in the 90s, what killed it was Deep Blue Sea then got announced. Oh, no, actually, the Meg got announced, and then another movie got announced, TV show called Extinct, about another megalodon. But then Deep Blue Sea got made and then beat the Meg to the big screen. And then the day that Deep Blue Sea premiered on the day that Deep Blue Sea was released on HBO, Shark Attack was released. And then, so it's just weird, like how that all, but I think Shark Attack definitely got rushed because of Deep Blue Sea. So,
well, you brought up the podcast, tie it back to your guys' podcast, in case people don't know. What is a movie, whether you've covered it or not, a shark related movie that didn't get made, a version that you would have loved to have seen that you've covered? I mean, or aquatic horror in general, because I obviously there's been really cool iterations of, say, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and you guys have talked about other Meg versions, but is there something that you were just like, oh, I wish that had existed?
I mean, episode Bekah was on, At the Mountains of Madness. I know that's not officially aquatic horror, but
it's pretty damn close.
It falls into a similar vein.
Yeah.
And
that one was such, you guys, listeners, you should go listen to that episode of Best Movies Never Made, because that was just such an eye-opening one for me, because you guys actually had a copy of Del Toro's script. And suddenly, though I'd been bemoaning, why wouldn't they make this for years? Suddenly I'm reading it going, oh, I see why they wouldn't make this.
Yeah,
it's
very expensive.
Very expensive, not PG-13 in any capacity, very niche horror stylings, I'll say. Like, it's not like a broad, like vanilla playing at a mall near you type horror film. That probably would cost $100 million. So yeah, it was immediately clear why the studio would probably be like, yeah, maybe not.
He still wants to make that though, right? I think I've heard him recently say he thinks it could still happen.
It's never quite going to leave him.
I hope it does. It's a phenomenal script the one we read.
Yeah.
But it's funny because a lot of scripts we talk about, even though our podcast is called Best Movies Never Made, they're not necessarily all movies that would have been amazing.
Yeah.
But it's usually something where just like, it would have been so interesting for the movie to exist. And a perfect example is we just did National Lampoon's Jaws 3 People Zero, which would have been an official Jaws 3, but also a National Lampoon movie. Like, it's one of those things you talk about it and you're just like, why would Universal have ever gone for that? So I guess it's not surprising that they ultimately killed it before it was going to go into production. Joe Dante was going to direct it. John Hughes wrote it.
Is it good? Is the script good?
That's the thing, is it probably would have gotten better. I mean, granted, this was Joe Dante coming right off Piranha. So I don't think he would have quite had total power to argue against National Lampoon right after Animal House made Animal House made like the same amount of money as like Jaws and Star Wars. It was an R-rated college comedy. Yeah. So they had a lot of power. And obviously Zanuck and Brown still had all the power in the world from Jaws. I think it could have gotten better. It's definitely not as good as you would hope, hearing all the names involved, but it's also just imagining that existed, that's one of the ones we would have been watching on TBS growing up. And now it would be hard for anyone to believe it ever did get made. The main problem, my complaint is that it's not a horror comedy. It's just a comedy that kind of has some shark stuff in it. I think it would have been really funny if they'd done a full-on hilarious comedy full of wall-to-wall shark attacks. But
yeah, there is a funny scene when they open up the shark on the dock and they keep pulling stuff out of it. They did that in it, and one of Josh's favorite things in that was they pull out a goldfish in a bowl,
but like with water in it. Somehow it never tipped over while inside the shark the whole time.
Yeah, they just keep pulling stuff out. There's moments in it that are hilarious though,
because it's a great idea that in a way the super short summary of the movie is not actually what the movie is, but the basic idea is that much like the plot of a Jaws movie, an actual shark is plaguing the production of the shoot of Jaws 3. and the studio doesn't want to shut the movie down. But it's not quite actually what's going on, but I feel that's the basic version.
That's
but just
that really fun.
Yeah, saying that out loud, I'm like, that movie would have been amazing.
That's a great log line.
Yeah.
But that would be funnier after 3, 4, and 5. I think,
I literally say that on the podcast. I think it came too soon.
That makes sense.
Because they're just cracking jokes in it about Jaws 2.
Yeah.
When really they should have been cracking jokes about like it should have been coming, or like that should have been Jaws 5, actually. They should have waited until the franchise had run itself into the ground and then done a weird comedy.
Yeah, there's a running joke where it's like, this is already better than Jaws 2. You know, they'd say stuff like that.
And Steve and I are like, but Jaws 2's good.
I like Jaws 2. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
There was one aquatic horror thing I found in a newspaper, and there was like only one line about it that I'm just fascinated. I think it was like back in '76, and I'm reading it right now. Piranha. This is before Joe Dante's Piranha. Piranha, the story of a nut who slips piranha fish into swimming pools of the wealthy. That's it.
Of the wealthy.
That's it. That's the only log line. It never came out.
It never came out. I mean, it's the opening of Wednesday now, but that's
this is 1976, and I'm like, what is this movie? And I can't find anything else.
That's closer to a Bone. Larry Cohen with a rat, you know. But
or even this brings back to what we were talking about with two movies kind of coming out simultaneously, where we see the William Graffy Mako film being made simultaneous to Jaws, and it actually kind of beats Jaws, but that's a similar setup where it's somebody kind of a revenge film that's using sharks and in that case using piranha.
I also realized we did an episode with David Bruckner came on to talk about his Friday the 13th movie that never happened.
That was a good episode.
Nick Antosca, and I wouldn't call that aquatic horror, but it really plays into the like Jason Friday the 13th 6 and 7, like him at the bottom of the lake element. They do a lot with that.
Yeah, that's one of those ones that they could still make that script. That's what drives me crazy. I think one woman, well, because it takes place during the daytime, and one woman is just hanging out in the lake, watching it all happen and hiding there, and then eventually he gets her. But man, that script is oh my god, I wish they'd still make it. It's so good.
Was that the found footage one or a different version?
The different one. It was the 3D one.
Right. Okay, that's right. I remember the difference. Yeah.
There's been so many different Friday the 13th pitches that everybody comes in on. So yeah, I'm glad that one exists. I hope it gets made. I love the team.
Oh God,
I wish they just made them all, because it's like
we would do it every year.
That's what's great about the 80s ones, is they clearly put barely any thought into what the next one was going to be, because they had to crank them out so quickly.
Yeah, too much pressure now.
They wanted Jason in the snow, and we all, like there was a bunch of us.
I still don't understand how they've made so many Friday the 13th movies, and we've never seen him walk out onto a hockey rink.
And it could just be the opening, right?
Yeah,
you could do it as the opening, and then the snow could thaw, and then you cut the summer, and you're in. It's so bizarre that they've never done that.
I want to see him encounter a goalie. That's all I need.
While we have all of you on here, I think everyone needs to give me. Let's give everyone a shark rec. Any movie that whether it's in the doc or not, everyone give one shark film rec, just so people have something to dive in after you've seen the film on Shudder, and you need more. Steve, what are you recommending?
Oh my god, that's hard.
You get one. You have a list of 230.
First thing that comes to your mind.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the one, I can only do one. All right, I think Deep Blue Sea 3 that came out a couple of years ago is awesome, and it was underappreciated when it came out, because I don't think the second one people were impressed with, except that one scene when the shark swims by and listens in on a conversation. I think that's the one memory of that one. But part 3 I thought was fantastic, and if you want to see
stars on that one, I didn't remember
that. Oh my gosh, is that the one where it's set on like the island that's being flooded by global warming? It's so fucking good,
right?
It's such a good movie.
Yeah, no one talks about it, but
it's great.
It is. I would definitely recommend that. It's
gave me vibes of co-written by our friend Mark Gottlieb, I believe, Planet of the Sharks, which is Kevin Costner's Water World, but
Mark Atkins.
where sharks have eaten all the fish in the world, so now their only choice is to jump out of the water and pluck humans off of floating cities.
Oh wow.
That's not my recommend yet.
I did not know that existed.
Yeah,
It's
Planet of the
fun.
Sharks.
It's a fun one. Planet of the Sharks.
No, I absolutely love Deep Blue Sea 3. I'm so glad that you said
Wait,
that
how
one.
many did that go up to, Deep Blue Sea?
That's it.
I think
Part
that was
3.
the last one, but it was surprisingly smart. Like that was the thing, is
Yes.
it wasn't just like a sequel, shark sequel. Like it had its own agenda and storyline and was just good.
Yeah, because there's so many of these movies, but then when you watch one that's good, you're like, oh my God, this is good.
Yeah.
You're so happy. You know?
It's totally true.
So,
Yeah,
How about you, Bekah?
I'll say The Reef 2,
Hmm.
which is a weird one, but that one came out probably last year, and it's not as good as some of the other ones, but it had some really good jump scares. And if I can get still freaked out by a shark jump scare, I'm in. And I'll do a deep cut as well, if I'm allowed. And I'm gonna go with Monster Shark, just because it didn't get mentioned in the documentary, and I get it. It's not a great movie, but I'm kind of fascinated by it because it does something different than a lot of the Sharksploitation movies, because it comes at the end of the cycle. This is like 80s, plus it's Bava, and so it's got
Oh, I
kind of
have seen that. Yeah.
this Italian street cred behind it, but it's supposed to be this prehistoric shark thing, and it's got like messed up teeth, but it's this very much like rubber thing floating on the surface of the water the entire time. But it's got like, sometimes they shoot from inside its mouth. Like I find the movie fascinating. It's not the greatest shark film you're ever going to see, but there's something interesting about it.
All right, Josh, you can't cheat like she did.
I'm gonna go with-
Deep cuts is what we do here,
I
sir.
know. We could have them on forever to talk about
Yeah.
deep cuts. You are correct.
I'm also going to go with one that we didn't feature in the doc, especially because, Steve and I just started a Patreon for our podcast. So everyone should listen to those. But in part, I think we like the Patreon because our podcast is so specific that now on our bonus episodes, we can basically do this and just talk about movies. And inevitably, we did our own kind of shark episode, and it caused me to rewatch the TV movie Red Water, starring Lou Diamond Phillips and Coolio. And it was so much better than I remembered. I think because at the time I was comparing it very much to Deep Blue Sea and like the level of effects they have in that. So it just felt like kind of cheesy to me. But now we've gotten so far down the kind of like asylum sci-fi rabbit hole where they often don't even build a cheesy looking rubber shark, that it was just kind of exciting to see something that they did before a TV movie had the money and technology had improved enough to just have wall-to-wall CG. And it's a very weird plot because it involves like gangsters and stuff.
It's great. You're so right, man.
And who doesn't want Lou Diamond Phillips? Come on.
And Coolio. No, I highly recommend that too, because I was the same way. When it came out, I was looking at it a little like, I was judging it, and then I rewatched it not that long ago, and I just fell in love with it because it's like practical effects, and it's on Tubi right now. Because a while back, like a year or two back, you couldn't find it anywhere, and now it's on Tubi. So
there's a lot of shark films on Tubi right now. I was even mentioning right at the top of the show that my students have recommended Shark Side of the Moon, which is apparently also on Tubi. So yeah, and that's where you find most of your awesome Chinese shark films as well.
We love
Yes.
Tubi.
Yeah,
Tubi is
rules.
amazing.
And Shark Side of the Moon is directed by the guy at Asylum that does all the shark effects. So they gave him a movie to direct, and that movie, I love it. It's total WTF movie. I loved it.
I was so glad you guys featured Ghost Shark as much as you did, by the way. That does not get enough love. Sorry. Sidebar.
Yes.
I'll end with, in terms of the deep cuts, the one I remember telling you, Steve, when I saw this, it became one of my favorite movies and my favorite like pre-Lebowski characters. But if you're a fan of The Visitor and you like Franco Nero playing Space Jesus, then the Shark Hunter has just the most energetic opening I've ever seen to a character.
Dude, that's the most Elric Kane movie ever.
I fell in love with it. It's like one of my favorite movies.
Like...
It's Enzo Castellari, who did ripoffs as well, other ripoffs of the Shark. But it's just like literally Franco Nero with a big beard jumping off, like he's chilling out in a tree, and he sees something and he just jumps out, does a dive roll, Kevin McAllister's, and then he's like a shark hunter who's just actually Lebowskiing until he can figure out where this missing treasure is. So it's really a treasure hunting movie, but it's just one of those ones I had never even heard of it when I watched it. And I'm like, how is this not talked about by everyone? This is a great character. Great movie. But yeah, so many movies still lost to time, man.
I hadn't heard of Night of the Shark till you told me about that one, and that's Treat
and
Williams.
On R.I.P. Treat Williams.
Fuck you, Shark.
Fuck you, Shark.
Yeah, that's a fun one too.
Yeah.
But they are fun. Always fun to get these discoveries. I love talking to you guys about these. And Patreon, for people who don't subscribe to ours or yours or any, I think what we all hit at is at a certain point, if you do a podcast long enough, there are certain structures that you kind of have
to follow.
But your brain wants to go to weird shit. That is where Patreon is, and I really think as a creator, I have so much fun when I do those, and it's not just a money making thing. I think it's a really great way to support people to keep doing these things. So I hope
we always stop we allow ourselves some tangents because we don't want to kill the conversation, and we don't really edit our shows. But at some point, we're just like, why are we talking about the Guyver 2 so much in this?
I can't stop
in this episode about some other unmade movie. So we'll steer it away. But we're like, now on Patreon, we could have a whole episode about the Guyver 2.
That's where we are. Like, if I talk about Satan's mistress here on the regular show, I'm always like, somebody is turning this off right now going, what the fuck is she even talking about? But over at our Patreon show, I'm like, okay, guys, we're doing 15 minutes on Satan's mistress. Let's go. So,
No, it's the good stuff. That's good stuff everywhere. But yeah, thanks guys so much. And really, again, great film. I haven't really talked to you since seeing it, Steve, but really it's...
Oh, I know. We haven't talked in forever.
It's totally. It's really strong. And just like, I love to learn something about stuff you kind of know, but you don't have the thread to pull it together. So that's a great way to do it. So well done.
I appreciate it. I was very lucky. Rebekah rules, and then I was happy. Jim Coons, can't thank him enough, and Josh and Carrie. I mean, I was very lucky to have cool people to come in, and the thing was, we had to hide the title from like from the marine biologists and all the filmmakers. They didn't see the title until they signed the release form. I had to be sneaky, but because I didn't want to scare people off, because we wanted to let people know, like, yo, this isn't, we're trying to do something a little different. And so I'm very humbled that people are enjoying it.
Yeah. So what is next for you guys? Like, Steve, I know you're on to another documentary, or one that you've been working on throughout this. And Josh, do we get another Sonic movie new?
Yeah. I mean, it's the script's all done. The movie's ready to go. The strikes are impacting that, obviously. I mean, not our strike, the WGA, because again, the script is over. But the actor's strike is meaningful. They can't start shooting until that deal is worked out. But, I know some fans are very worried about it, but I don't think we have to worry that the movie will never happen. It just might be a little delayed, but hopefully we can keep our release date. I'm staying optimistic. I think both unions striking simultaneously is going to put a lot more, especially the actors, they're going to put a lot more pressure on the studios to figure this out quicker than they would if it was just us worthless, no good writers.
Well, if not, my kids are going to show up and like picket your front lawn to read that script. So
not mine. Tell them to picket Paramount. Get them out there with a sign.
Hell yeah. And Steve, can you tell us about the next doc that you're working on, or what's your research baby right now?
I'm producing a documentary that Jim Coons, who I brought up multiple times, is directing about movie novelizations. We are still working away on that, about, the world of movie novelizations, how, it's authors are forced to take a 90-page script and expand it into 300 pages. And it's a really looked down upon trash literature thing. So we're doing a documentary on that. And then Josh and I are, of course, doing our podcast, and I'm researching hopefully the next thing I'm going to direct. But in the meantime, I'm producing that for Jim, who is directing the novelization doc.
That one I've been so excited about for so long, knowing you guys are doing that. But I'll tell you, it's such a mysterious world. I work with a guy, have for years, right? Like, we're talking like 7 or 8 years. I'm working with this guy side by side. He's a screenwriter. And then just out of the blue, a few, like a couple months ago, he goes, yeah, I also did a novelization once for True Lies. I was like, what? You did the True Lies novel? And he did. And I read it at the start. It's fucking awesome. And it's so different. And so, but
nice.
Like, I think people keep it a secret. That's what I'm getting. I don't think people are like lead with that,
I think they're becoming cooler now, but when we started the doc, they just, the thing was, it's just, when I read Friday 13 Part 6, like when I was like in junior high, you know, and then years later I would meet people and then start having conversations of the same people that read it. And they were like, oh, Jason was in school and you learned about his dad. And then it was like this thing you would just bond with people when they've read the same novelization as you did, you know? So I don't know. I've always found it fascinating. And the Jaws 4 novelization. Of
Jaws
course,
4 novelization is like God. I love that one. Yeah,
perfect summer reading, right?
It's all about voodoo. It was the shark
God.
and the curse, and it gets fully supernatural, which I love. So.
And we'll waive all Patreon costs to you. Give you free Patreon for life if you send me Teddy, the book version of Teddy Guide. So if anyone's listening, just send me Teddy
for years.
We are too. It's so hard to find, right?
I think Collins found one. I thought Collins found one.
I know.
And he posted for like $1 or something at one of those things, and I was so mad because even on eBay once it was like $350, $400.
Oh,
I just want to read it because I love the pit so much, and I have no clue how you would put that into words.
such a masterpiece.
I'm so curious.
What is the book like, right?
Yeah, I'm just curious. But anyway, one day we will get there together.
Well, thank you guys so much for tuning into the show tonight, and we will talk to you soon. In the meantime, please watch the Sharksploitation documentary, now streaming on Shudder. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in tonight. You can find us on our Patreon show, Deep Cuts, if you need to just hear a lot more about Satan's Mistress in the meantime. And otherwise, we will be back in 2 weeks with even more aquatic horror. And in the meantime, y'all might want to read the upcoming, or actually, I think it's released now, book Whale Fall by Daniel Krauss. Thank you guys.